In this video, I'm going over a little bit of a deck building list, in case you ever, in the future, for whatever reason, just really need to know of some of the best generic monsters that can special summon themselves from their hand, and are level 4. And at number 10, we have Tenyi Spirit Shathana. Technically, Mapura and Nahata also fit this list, as what these 3 cards do is special summon themselves from your hand if you control no effect monsters on your side of the field. Now, there are actually a lot of monsters that can special summon themselves from your hand if you control no other monsters, like Heroic Challenger Assault Halberd, Photon Thrasher, and ZS Ascended Sage. But the reason why we have the Tenyi cards on here is because they also have some combo potential with their Link 1, Monk of the Tenyi, which means it can be converted into a monster in order to destroy something with its graveyard effect, where if a non-effect monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can bring it back and then destroy one monster your opponent controls. So out of all the cards that can special summon themselves from the hand with a clear field, Shathana is the only one that has the potential to double as a removal option just in case, which is why it lands at number 10 on this list. And at number 9, we have Dogmatica Ecclesia the Virtuous. This card can special summon itself from your hand if your opponent controls a special summon monster from the extra deck, a trait which is shared by the other 2 level 4 Dogmatica monsters. However, out of all 3 of them, Ecclesia is the best, specifically because it also has an optional search effect when it's special summoned, which allows you to add any Dogmatica card from your deck to your hand, except another copy of itself. However, if you use its search effect, then you cannot special summon from your extra deck for the rest of the turn. But if you only use the effect to special summon itself, then you're fine to special summon from the extra deck and you basically have no lock on yourself. So it can be a free level 4 extender, assuming there's an extra deck monster on the field. However, since it does require monster to be on the field, it's lower on this list than the other spots, which are a little bit easier to bring out. But the conditions of having an extra deck monster on either field is such an easy requirement that I thought it should be included on this list despite not being wholly generic. And at number 8, we have Dynabase. This card can be special summoned from your hand once per turn as long as your life points are lower than your opponent's. It also has an additional effect where you can perform a fusion summon using this card as well as materials from your hand or field. Now, this card is not on this list at all for its fusion effect, and purely for the ability to special summon itself from your hand. If you're going first and both players' life points are at 8,000, then this card is basically dead in hand, which is why it's not high on this list despite being so easy to special summon from your hand. But there are a lot of cards which lower your life points incidentally in order to activate their effects, that it is possible to have less life points than your opponent in order to use this card, or if you just play it with something like Upstart Goblin to increase your opponent's life points instead. There will be some cards later on this list that lower your life points that could possibly allow you to play this card alongside it. Basically, lowering your life points is not that hard, but it's still not wholly generic like more of the higher spots on this list, which is why it's only at number 8. And at number 7, we have Danger Mothman. And also Danger Chupacabra because they both have the same special summoning condition where you can reveal this card in your hand in order to have your opponent randomly choose one card in your hand, and then if the card they choose is not the danger monster you revealed, you get to special summon the danger monster then draw a card. And the only difference between all the danger monsters is their second effect, which activates if they're discarded from the hand, where Danger Mothman has a pretty good discard effect, where both players draw one card and then discard one card, basically allowing you to cycle through your deck a little bit. Additionally, Danger Mothman can be searched out with Gokipole, which has an effect that searches a level 4 insect from your deck if it's sent to the graveyard in any way. So if you're just playing a couple of dangers in your deck in order to get out free levels from your hand, you could also play Gokipole for an accidental discard in order to search out Mothman. In fact, Gokipole was sometimes played in Danger Telement decks in order to search out Mothman when milled from the deck. Although, even without using Gokipole, Mothman is generally the best level 4 danger you can play out of the 2, because its discard effect is actually useful in a vast majority of decks, whereas Chupacabra's discard effect is just to special summon a danger monster from your graveyard that's not itself, so could be useless unless you play a lot of other danger monsters. Whereas Danger Mothman is useful by itself in decks and thus very generic. At number 6, we have the Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine. This is a normal trap card with the effect where it special summons itself as a level 4 warrior Nor monster. Now, there are a lot of trap monsters that are level 4 and none of them are on this list except for Shade Brigandine, specifically because this card has an extra ability that allows you to activate at the turn it's set, with the condition that you simply have no other trap cards in your graveyard, which is a condition a lot of decks should be able to easily fulfill on their first turn, and even after the first turn because not every deck is trap heavy. And this has actually allowed this card to see a lot of competitive play in the past, because it's basically a free level 4 on board in a lot of decks. And it's even very useful for its trap status, because if you use this to go into Time Thief Redoer, you'll have its spin effect alive. And at number 5, we have Runic Tip, or more specifically, all the Runic cards, because all of the Runic Quick Play spells allow you to special summon Gary the Runic Fangs from your extra deck, which is how you get a generic level 4 monster in the field for this list. However, there is the really big downside that all of the Runic Quick Play spell cards have, in that you have to skip your next battle phase, which can be a huge deal breaker for a lot of decks. But if you're playing a deck that can give up their next battle phase, then having pretty much any of the Runic Quick Play spell cards to get out Gary is a very good way to get a level 4 monster on the field. Specifically because a lot of the Runic cards double as other forms of removal, specifically Freezing Curses to negate a monster, Destruction to destroy a spell or trap, and Flashing Fire to destroy a special summon monster. So if you want to double up on removal cards that have the option to special summon a level 4 monster, all of the Runic cards are options for that. And at number 4, we have the 3 instant fusion cards. Ready Fusion, Instant Fusion, and Instant Contact. All 3 of these cards basically have the same effect where you pay 1000 life points to cheat out a fusion monster from your extra deck, with no other locks on the player who uses the card for the rest of the turn, except for the monster they bring out, which has a restriction on it. But what's important about these 3 cards is they all have an option to bring out a level 4 monster. Instant Fusion can bring out any level 4 monster, with generally the best one being Mudragon of the Swamp. Retort Fusion can bring out a non-effect fusion monster, which actually gives you quite a few options like Darkfire Dragon. And Instant Fusion has Neospacian Marine Dolphin and Neospacian Twinkle Moss as its level 4 options. And since all of these cards are hard once per turns, you could just play 1 copy of each in order to guarantee that all of them will be able to bring a level 4 monster to the field. And since they all require you to pay 1000 life points, they can also fulfill the requirements at Dynabase of having low life points in your opponent. And at number 3, we have Tearlament Shiren. This card can special summon itself from your hand as long as you send 1 other monster from your hand to the graveyard. Then it will also mill the top 3 cards of your deck. Technically, this is the only card on this list that requires you to go minus in order to bring it out. However, it does also mill 3 cards in the process, which could be seen as an upside worth that downside. And it is a completely generic special summon from the hand, and there aren't really many other level 4 monsters that can bring themselves out from the hand with a simple discard. It also sends from the hand to the graveyard as an effect, which triggers a lot of sent to the graveyard effects like Night Sword Serpent, or pretty much any of the other Tearlament monsters. And at number 2, we have Dinotherium. This is a card that can special summon itself from your hand on a hard once per turn. However, it will then allow your opponent to special summon a level 4 monster from either graveyard to their field. So it does have a pretty bad downside, which is entirely avoidable as long as it's your first turn and you don't have any other monsters in your graveyard yet. So if it's the first card you play for the turn and the graveyards are empty, it's basically a free special summon from the hand without any fuss. One of the easiest to accomplish effects out of all the cards we have on this list so far, which require you to jump through some kind of hoop to use. But if you draw it later on in your combos, chances are you're going to give your opponent a level 4 monster if you're playing a lot of level 4 monsters in your deck. In which case, it still might be useful as long as you don't have any really good level 4s in your graveyard that your opponent wants to steal. And before going to the number 1, let's go over a few honorable mentions. First up, we have Parallel Exceed, which can special summon itself from your hand as a level 4 monster if you link summon a monster. And then it allows you to special summon another copy of itself from your deck, who will also change itself to level 4. So if you're playing any kind of link monster and need a level 4 monster that special summon itself from your hand, Parallel Exceed is kind of the best, because it brings itself another copy of itself out from your deck. We also have Kage Takage, which can special summon itself from your hand as long as you normal summon a level 4 monster, which is incredibly generic and usable in pretty much any deck, but does require your normal summon in order to get the trigger. So if you draw it later on in your combos and you've already used your normal summon, it's basically dead in hand, whereas a lot of the other cards in this list are not. And now at number 1, we have Perform Mage Hat Tricker. This card can special summon itself from your hand if there are 2 or more monsters on the field. And this does not need to be your monsters only, it does also count your opponent's. So if you're going second, bringing this card from your hand is almost trivial. The effect is also not a hard once per turn like pretty much every other card on this list. So if you have 3 copies of Perform Mage Hat Tricker in your hand, you can bring them all out for the exact same requirement. So because this card has a very generic requirement for its special summon, and doesn't have a hard once per turn on that special summon, I think it's probably the best generic level 4 monster you can special summon from your hand. And the archetype it's part of even synergizes with a lot of the other cards on this list, since Perform Mage Damage Juggler can search the card out for its graveyard effect, and you can send it to the graveyard with Danger Mothman or Tearlament Shiren. Also, Perform Mage Trick Clown can special summon itself from the graveyard if it's sent there, and inflict 1000 points of damage to yourself if it does, which can help you activate the effect of Dynabase. So even though all of these cards are pretty generic, they do kind of synergize with each other in a way, which is some nice accidental synergy. Alright, and that's the list. I want to do a series of lists based on deck building ideas, where if you just really need to know which are the best super poly targets, for example, you can just look up one of my videos on it. So if you have any other ideas on possible future videos about generic cards that can possibly be considered for whatever deck you're building, I'd be very interested in those specific kinds of ideas down in the comments.